welcome to Southern Ontario Sports Podcast. This is the week of Monday, November 10th. Thank you very much for joining us and welcome to the show. I am Adam Thomas, alongside here with Steven Resnick. Give us a follow on Twitter at the SOS Podcast. Steve, how are you doing?
Doing pretty well, coming off a solid 4-0, 5-0 if you count the Argos Toronto sports weekend over here, so hard to argue against that.
So the people are feeling good in Toronto, Steve. Of course, after a big weekend, as you mentioned. While we've been away, obviously a lot of sporting action. We're going to have a look here at Week 10, take a review of the week and pick some winners going down the stretch. Sens and Leafs, of course, a couple weeks of hockey. The Raptors have officially tipped off now. And lastly, of course, Madison Bumgarner and the San Francisco Giants winning the World Series. So why don't we start there, Steve?
Yeah, I mean, it's rare to say in baseball that one player can single-handedly win a team a World Series, but seemingly Madison Bumgarner did that for them. Coming off a complete game shutout, over 115 pitches, 2 days rest, and still throws 5 more shutout innings. There's really not much more you can say about that.
Totally agree. And before I have my quick word on Bumgarner, let's not forget Buster Posey, Pence, Sandoval. They did a solid job coming through for the Giants, but this is all about Madison Bumgarner. I tweeted out right after the series wrapped up that this was virtually a lock to get him in the Hall of Fame, in my opinion. Having a look back, I don't know if I could find anybody other than maybe Curt Schilling with the 2001 Orioles, or maybe John Smoltz with the 96 Braves. But he only ended up pitching 38 innings to Schilling's 48.1 and Bumgarner's 52.2. But I'd like to take a second here just to have a quick rundown of the Bumgarner versus Schilling numbers here on those two seasons. So in 52 innings for Bumgarner, he was 4-1 in 6 games started, ERA of 1.03, gave up 28 hits across that span with a whip of .65, which is stunning. Then if you have a look at Schilling, he went 4-0 across 6 games started, virtually identical to Bumgarner, with an ERA of 1.12. 25 hits over his 48 innings and a whip of .64. So the numbers, again, virtually identical. Schilling did have a few more strikeouts for what it's worth. But just a performance of a lifetime, I think, here by Madison Bumgarner. And one I won't forget anytime soon. Steve, your thoughts?
Yeah, it was just one of those things where while you were watching it, you knew that even before the game was over, that this was going to be a historic moment, regardless of how it played out at the end.
So again, congratulations to Madison Bumgarner and the San Francisco Giants on their World Series championship.
Welcome to the National Hockey League.
Then you have the Toronto Maple Leafs.
The home ice advantage is actually a disadvantage.
Ottawa Senators.
If I was an Ottawa Senators fan.
Kessel had a couple goals.
A late goal by Ryan off a nice pass from Carlson.
Gotta love the Habs.
Suarez looking to be a dominant player again.
All right, so a lot to talk about on the NHL front in the past few weeks here. Of course, the Ottawa Senators and Toronto Maple Leafs having a chunk of games in there. But first off, I'd like to give a nod to the Montreal Canadiens. We haven't featured them on the show yet, and although they are not, of course, part of Southwestern Ontario, we do give a little bit of love to the Habs on the show. And I think we'll tackle them, Steve, next week with our quarter season NHL review. We'll talk a little Habs there. Shout out to my cousin Michelle down in Hotlanta, Georgia. He's been a Habs fan his whole life. So look for some Habs chat next week. But on to the Leafs and Sens. Maybe we'll tee this up real quick. Since we last taped, Leafs have had wins against Buffalo, Columbus, and Chicago. A nice win there, although they got outshot badly. A couple of losses in Arizona and Colorado. Then they bounced back more recently with a 6-4 win against the Rangers. And lastly, a 5-3 win Saturday night here against my Senators. So not a bad little stretch for the Leafs, going 5-2 over that period. More up than down, which is nice. Quick thoughts there, Steve, on that chunk of hockey.
You can't say that they got a serious challenge when they played Buffalo or even Columbus in the game after being so depleted, but it's good to see them when they're playing these teams that they're not taking them lightly. And even though in the Buffalo game it was 1-0 going to the third, the Leafs thoroughly dominated that, only allowing 10 shots. And it was really, really good to see them for once just take these teams to task and not play down to their level. And then against Chicago, I don't think anyone really expected that to come out with 2 points for the Leafs, but Reimer plays a great game. You think maybe going out on the road, they have Arizona and Colorado, bit of a chance to get some points against the Western Conference opponents. Fortunately, the Leafs come out flat both games. doesn't look so good. They're coming back only 1 point out of the 4 available. And of course, they come back right around and win 2 straight over the weekend, back to back against the Rangers and Senators. So for now, all is well in Leafland, but we shall see going forward with the big game against Boston coming up.
Yeah, from the Leafs side of things, Steve, I think you got to be happy. 5 wins in the last 7 games, including most recently putting in 6 and 5 goals against the Rangers and Senators. Nice to see the offense get going. Their wins against Buffalo, probably not the toughest competition. I'll agree with you there. But nice win against Chicago, even though they were outshot badly. And maybe that's the theme here for the Leafs, is the amount of shots they're surrendering. Maybe something we'll touch on here in a moment. But before we do chat shots, let's tee up the Senators' past week and a half, 2 weeks of hockey here. Their win-loss record not all that different from the Leafs over this stretch. In fact, playing very similar hockey to the Leafs. So without further ado, let's get to it. Going back to our last tape show, they had a 5-2 win against Columbus. 5-4 loss to Chicago in the shootout. Bad loss to the Bruins where Erik Karlsson looked particularly bad that night. They take a 3-1 win against Detroit where they have probably their best period of hockey in years. A 3-0 win against the Wild. A 2-1 loss to the Jets. And then the 5-3 loss to the Leafs. So some up and down hockey from the Senators as well. Your thoughts on their stretch of hockey, Steve?
Yeah, I think everyone was a bit pleasantly surprised with the way they started. I'm not sure too many people expected them to come out as hot as they did. I'm not sure anyone would have expected the Senators to beat the Blackhawks or the Bruins, so I'm not sure if those are losses that you can really be too upset about. And again, they're winning the games they probably should be. They probably would have liked to have played a cleaner, more defensive game against the Leafs last time out, but I think overall they're still pretty happy with how they're playing and how their young players are producing and fitting in nicely in the lineup.
Yeah, absolutely. I have to spend a moment here talking quickly about that newfound kid line. It's been phenomenal, a real burst of energy for the Senators, and now putting up points on a what appears to be a pretty consistent basis. I think I sounded a little nuts on our preseason review of the Sens when I said they should have at least 2 of them playing up on the second line. Here we have now 3 with Curtis Lazar formally finding a home. They're going to keep him for the season. It's been probably the brightest spot for the Ottawa team through this first portion of the season. But not to digress there, let's get into the game between the Leafs and Sens. Of course, Leafs winning 5-3. Senators actually, from their perspective, outshooting the Leafs on the night 41-30. Leonard gets hung out on a couple, lets a few softies through as well. MacArthur, Turris are -4, -3 respectively, which is just not good enough. But on the positive side, Hoffman and Stone continuing to find points on their end. If you're looking at things from the Leafs' perspective, things did go a little bit better. It's a quiet night for Phil Kessel, but the story here is the secondary scoring. Really nice to see on the Leafs' perspective. Santorelli, JVR, Holland, Clarkson now pitching in here and there. It's been a nice boost for the team. In goal, Reimer starts a little shaky, but he steadies and ultimately gets the win. Steve, let's have your thoughts on the game here.
Yeah, I think it was, firstly, to see the teams go to the War Memorial in the morning prior to the game, I think was a nice touch that most people around the country probably enjoyed. And then when it got to the game, it was a pretty exciting one as well, both on the ice and in the stands, if you've seen some of those videos going around. But for the Leafs, I think to see Peter Holland continue to play really well and click with Santorelli and even producing a shorthanded goal, which turned out to be the game winner, I think you've got to be really happy with that. You're getting some depth, so not only you've got your top line with Kessel, Bozak, JVR, but you've got the lower part of the lineup finally producing, chipping in key goals as well. Even David Clarkson getting in on the action as well.
Yeah, definitely exciting game, and the type of hockey these two teams usually play against each other, as you know, Steve. But as I alluded to a few moments ago, we'd like to have a little chat here on shots for and against as it concerns the Leafs and Sens. So I'll go through a few numbers here. Shots per game from the Senators and Leafs, very close. They're both averaging over 30 a game, so good shot totals there in their favor. Unfortunately, when you flip the coin and you look at shots against per game, both finished in the bottom 4 in the league, averaging over 33 shots per game. So they're actually getting outshot on a nightly basis by a couple shots a game. This may or may not be concerning depending how you look at things. I think it's slightly concerning, in my opinion, for the Senators, only because the Leafs seem to be able to find a few more goals for than the Sens do. The Leafs coming in at 3.1 goals per game on the year. whereas the Senators are a little bit closer to 2.5, 2.6, depending exactly when you take your measure. I think Toronto, with that ability to score about a half goal more per game, probably does come out ahead when comparing straight ahead up to the Senators. If you're going to be involved in those track meet type games up and down the ice, just bombing in on the goaltenders, the ability for the Leafs to get an extra half goal here and there really will come in handy, even though they probably do give up a little bit more. Whereas the Senators, relying on a nightly basis, finding some stellar goaltending, probably not a reasonable expectation for the remainder of the year. So we'll see how these numbers pan out in the long run. But your thoughts there, Steve?
I think if you're the Leafs, you've got to be a bit concerned. This is pretty much how the season went last year, just relying on well above average goaltending from Bernier and Reimer. And we saw what happened when that does not keep up eventually by the end of the season, or they get too tired, or there's an injury. And so I think you definitely want to look into getting that lower, especially considering that 33.3 figure is with having a game having only 10 shots against. So it doesn't really highlight how bad they've been in some of those games. For Ottawa, again, I think similar to last year, just still allowing a lot of shots. And with that amount of shots, I don't know how much you can expect Anderson and Lander to really keep you in games deep into the season with that type of workload.
Yeah, I think for me, it comes down to the question, if you're going to be in these types of games, do you have elite goaltending? And I don't know if Ottawa or Toronto, either team does have elite goaltending. I think they've got, and I think the case right now with these teams is they have above average goaltending that's probably even playing beyond that, beyond their means of touch. And that can keep the team competitive in either case and keep them around in the playoff picture. So we'll see if that play can continue. But certainly an exciting week here for the Leafs and Sens. Your thoughts going forward over the next few games, Steve?
The Leafs got some tough games coming up. They got the Bruins, they got the Penguins, and then an easier one with the Sabres. So I'm not too optimistic seeing how they've played earlier in the season against Boston and Pittsburgh, but you got to figure they've got at least 2 points to bank against Buffalo on the weekend. And with the Senators going out west with Vancouver, Edmonton, Calgary, you got to like their chances to at least get 4, if not maybe more, out of 6 points there.
Yeah, I think this will be crucial for the Senators. We can't forget, and it often does get forgotten, that the points at the beginning of the season are as relevant as those points down the last stretch. And if Ottawa wants to be able to compete to make a playoff run this year, I think you got to look at points against Edmonton, Calgary. Those opportunities are fairly rare throughout the calendar. So if they can't find at least 3 out of the 6 on the road trip, if not 4 out of the 6, I think it's a bit of a failure overall. Hopefully they get a good performance in against the Canucks tonight and can even find a point or a win there, but I wouldn't expect that. The Leafs, on the other hand, as you alluded to, the schedule is a little bit more daunting this next week. Buffalo, I'm sure, is a free 2 points. But I don't know if I like the other opponents being a little more stout. Then again, the Leafs did find a way to knock down Chicago not too long ago, and maybe they'll rise up against the Penguins and Bruins as well.
This is the NFL.
The hometown Bills.
I think Buffalo's going to keep it close. The home crowd will be with them. It'll give them some more energy.
308 yards, a touchdown.
But I don't think anyone was predicting the Bills to win.
New England Patriots looking good out there.
No one was going to stop Tom Brady.
New Orleans wins in OT.
San Francisco.
Cleveland pulls out a win. Okay, so let's chat about the NFL. Week 10 wrapping up here. We're going to do a extended version of Pick Your Poison. We're going to run through each division. We're getting to playoff time. We'll take a division winner in each division. We'll see how we do down the stretch run, but certainly playoffs looming and the playoff picture becoming a little clearer. So let's start off in the AFC East, having a quick chat here about our Bills against the Patriots and probably Dolphins. I think the Jets officially out of this conversation. Steve, who do you take for the AFC East?
Not to rain on your Bills parade like I do seemingly every week, but I will have to go with old reliable in New England in this case. They've got the division lead already. I don't see them giving it up, and home field is going to be important to them, so they definitely won't want to give it up. And for the Bills and Dolphins, they're both still alive, I think, for the wild card slot. So I wouldn't say they're definitely don't have a chance of making the playoffs at all, but I think it's going to be a very tough climb to try and catch New England.
Yes, you are the ever dampener of our Bills enthusiasm, but that's okay. I don't think it's misplaced here. New England 7-2. They've got 2-game lead on both the Bills and Dolphins. Neither the Bills or Dolphins doing themselves a favor this weekend with a couple of losses there. But New England is out front. They've been the creme of the division for the past decade now. I don't know if you pick a winner based on a decade's worth of performance, but with the 7-2 record, the way Brady's come on, the way Gronk looks healthy again, their offense is rolling. So give me the Pats as well, which takes both our votes, and we will head over to the AFC North, where this division effectively a toss-up at this point. As it stands right now, Cleveland does have a 1-game lead, sitting at 6-3, while Cincinnati at 5-3-1 with that one tie, of course. The Steelers and Ravens then at 6-4 apiece for, again, virtually a toss-up. Your thoughts on this division, Steve? Who's your winner?
We talked about the Browns a bit before and how they had a chance to really have a good record coming back into getting Josh Gordon back into their lineup. And lo and behold, here they are, 6-3, coming off a pretty walloping effort of the Bengals in prime time. And for some reason, I've been liking the Browns since the beginning of the year. I'm going to pick them to come out of the AFC North for the first time in very long.
Sticking with the Browns. Well, it's a gutsy call. Certainly history not on your side on this one. You know what? They are on top of the division right now. And I think the key point here, and you mentioned it, of course, they're just beating of the Bengals on Thursday night. That game might come up crucial. The divisional breakdown here, Browns are 2-2 in the division, Bengals 2-1, Pittsburgh 2-2, Baltimore 2-3, so virtually identical. I think that Thursday win is going to be a big one. But looking at the other teams, I think I like Baltimore down the stretch. I think they've got a few less gaps across the field compared to their opponents. Cleveland and the Steelers, Pittsburgh might be guilty of a couple of leaky defenses. The Bengals perpetually seem to be the team that you ask for a little bit more and you always get a little bit less. So I'll stick with Flacco, the experience, and a defensive unit that, if they can get past a few injuries, might be good enough to come out on top. So you can have the Browns. I will take the Ravens. Chatting quickly about the AFC South, we have the Indianapolis Colts out to 6-3 lead, 3-0 spotless divisional record. I think the only other team in contention here would be the Texans at 4-5. The Titans and Jacksonville Jaguars have a combined 3 wins, so probably not going to be competitive in this division. Steve, any reason to think the Colts won't do this?
I think it's hard to argue against them. Again, like you're saying, the division not very strong at this point in time. Houston just switching from Ryan Fitzpatrick to Ryan Mallett now, so who knows what they've got going there. They've had a bounce-back season from Arian Foster, but again, with bringing in a new quarterback at this point in the season, not really experienced, I don't know how much you can really expect from Houston, and I think it's Indy's division to lose and then some.
Absolutely agree. Indy's division to lose. I wouldn't be shocked if the Texans made a little bit of noise for a wild card place. They are only a game back, but they do have a strong defense, legitimate running game, and that can be enough to get you into the playoffs, but it certainly won't be enough through 16-game season to find you outdueling the Colts. So give us both the Colts in the AFC South. Looking at the AFC West, we have the 7-2 Broncos sitting atop the division. Kansas City only a game back at 6-3. Maybe makes the battle look a little closer on paper than in my mind in reality. You have the Chargers, who are at 5-4 and maybe on the outside looking in as it regards to this division. Your thoughts as this division will wind up down the stretch?
I might surprise you at this one. As good as Denver is, and I'm not making this decision based on, I think, their perceived potential drop-off. I just think Kansas City is very underrated, and especially the way their season ended last year, I think they're going to want to win this division, and it's going to be very important to them. They're within striking distance. They've got a very good defense, so I'm going to make the bold statement and say that Kansas City is going to come out of the AFC West.
Steve, I'm going to go online here and call you crazy after that prediction. That is nuts in my mind, but that's okay.
From a Bills fan, that's saying quite a bit.
Yeah, I know. Maybe that's fair. Maybe that's fair. For me, I will take the game in hand I've got already, and then you give me the Rams this week. You give me the Dolphins the week after. You give me a game against those very Chiefs after that. Another game here against the Bills coming up. The Chargers after that, the Bengals thereafter, and they wrap it up against the Oakland Raiders. There are wins all over the schedule for the Denver Broncos. No trouble at all getting there. Kansas City, I will give them their credit. They're not a bad squad, but they don't scare me. I don't know if they can find wins week in, week out reliably. Alex Smith has proven perfectly serviceable with Jamal Charles running up the score all over the place, but I have, relatively speaking, very little faith in the Chiefs versus the Broncos. And again, with that easy schedule for the Broncos, this is a no-brainer in my mind. So give me the Broncos. You will have the Chiefs, and I'll see you at the end of the season to claim my victory on that one. But that wraps us up for the AFC. Let's head over to the NFC here now next. Start with the highly competitive NFC East, featuring the Dallas Cowboys and Philadelphia Eagles battling atop the division. Likely going to be one of those two teams that win it out with the Giants and Redskins at 3 wins apiece only at this point. So, Steve, between the Eagles and Cowboys, which of these two teams do you like?
For this one, I think I'm going to go with the Cowboys. Des Bryant is playing for a contract, and he wants to get paid with a capital P, so I don't see him slowing down anytime soon. Tony Romo doesn't look to be too banged up, and he's still able to get on the field, so as long as that's happening, I like the Cowboys over the Eagles. I just don't see them being able to sustain scoring special teams and defensive touchdowns seemingly every week.
Yeah, a few valid points there. I don't disagree with any of that, and I'm going to point out here that the Eagles and Cowboys play each other in Week 13 and Week 15. So, Fox, you will have all the ratings in the world you want. I'm going to go one step further and say that this divisional race is decided Week 15 after whatever happens in Week 13. If these two teams split, it'll be interesting. If one of them walks away with the season series, it's all but over. And so in saying that, I think I'm going to take the Eagles. I like their offense to keep the team competitive week in, week out. Love Dallas as well. They're a strong team, probably going to have a wild card shot for sure. I would think their defense played well the first half of the year, but I think maybe some injuries starting to catch up. We'll see how Romo does coming out of the bye week. Hopefully he can stay healthy, but if that does add up, could be trouble for the Cowboys. So I've got the Eagles. Steve, you've got the Cowboys, but I think to be safe, we'll both have to tune in Week 15 to find out who takes this division. Heading over to the NFC North, we've got the Detroit Lions sitting atop right now at 7-2, Green Bay at 6-3, the Vikings 4-5, and the Chicago Bears, in my opinion, surprisingly at this point in the season, have basically played themselves out of this conversation. I don't know if the Vikings have much of a hope. Of course, actually, Adrian Peterson's name back in the news here, so we'll see how that boils down in the next couple weeks. But I think it's between the Lions and Packers here. Steve, do you have anything different to add to that, or are you splitting on the Packers and Lions?
Definitely agreeing on that it's a two-team race in this division. I don't think the Vikings are looking towards the playoffs and more so looking at developing Bridgewater. And like you said, the Bears are their fans are burning Jay Cutler jerseys after the most recent game. So I don't think they're looking at an eye towards the playoffs right now. Between the Lions and the Packers, even though the Lions do have the division lead and their defense is playing out of this world, the Packers have Aaron Rodgers. No disrespect to Matthew Stafford, but I like the Packers' chances so long as Rodgers is on the field, and I think they're going to overtake the Lions by the end of the season and take that NFC North.
Yeah, I am absolutely on the Packers bandwagon in regards to this question. They've got an elite offense in Green Bay, and while Detroit has a returning Megatron who's an elite player, I don't think they're quite at the same level. I've only won a handful of games by the skin of their teeth here. They're really not consistently winning football games. You see this Green Bay team come out and just dismantle division rival in Chicago out of the bye week. I don't see any way that they are getting slowed down. Maybe their defense is the Achilles heel, whereas Detroit's defense is their strength. But over the course of the remainder of the season, I'll take the Packers. And I think it'll be by more than a couple games when it's all said and done. Might be another hard year for Detroit fans. It's going to be competitive to make that wild card, and they might even come shy of that. So I'll take Green Bay with you there, Steve, to win the division. Looking at the NFC South, which might very well be the snoozer division of the league this year. New Orleans running away with it at 4-5 right now. They've got a full game lead over Carolina and Atlanta, but the way those two teams play football, it might be another 5 weeks before either of them wins a game. Tampa Bay at 1-8, just laughable. Their performance so far. So with those three teams, New Orleans, Carolina, Atlanta, 4-5, 3-6, and 3-6. Where do you see this one going, Steve, down the stretch?
Yeah, I think it's hard to put your faith in really any of those teams, but the Saints, they have Drew Brees. They've done it. They've been there before. I think you got to give them the benefit of the doubt when going up against as the teams as inconsistent as Carolina and Atlanta, and especially Tampa Bay at the bottom of the division.
Yeah, and it's frightening here. Just looking at the net points for and against across this division, New Orleans at a plus 26, so that's respectable. But second place Carolina is now sitting at a negative 83 points on the season. When that's your second place team, you got to ask Atlanta how at negative 19 you're only in third place, while the Buccaneers have given up a net differential of 105 points here. This division's disgusting. It's just gross. I do say New Orleans comes out on top. They do have the veteran presence of a Drew Brees, Sean Payton duo there, and that's going to ultimately win out. Carolina just looks atrocious, pretty much week in, week out. They got hammered on the offensive side of the ball by a hungry Eagles defense on Monday Night Football. Cam Newton has questions surrounding his performance, his potential, what he's bringing to this team now, just in disarray. I don't have much faith in the Falcons with their leaky defense. Can't seem to stop anybody through the air. So we'll give this one to New Orleans almost by default, but I think by a convincing margin when everything wraps up as well. Lastly, we'll spend a moment here talking about the highly competitive NFC West. Arizona Cardinals continuing to win at 8-1, although they've now lost Carson Palmer for the season, a huge blow to that team. I don't think Stanton coming in can give the same performance week in, week out, so they might need the cushion they've built up. They're 2 games ahead of second place Seattle, who's at 6-3. And then Seattle a game up on the 5-4 49ers. So a tight race there for second place with the Cardinals out by a couple. Where do you think this winds up down the stretch, Steve?
Yeah, no doubt about it, the Carson Palmer injury is a huge one for the Cardinals, and I don't think you're ever going to see an 8-1 team with a 2-game division lead be seen as such of an underdog at this point in time. But that being said, I like their defense. Patrick Peterson is one of the best. John Brown is really emerging as one of the go-to receivers on that team with Larry Fitzgerald. And I'm going to take the Cards and Drew Stanton to hold on to their division lead and be able to ride it out over the Seahawks and the Niners.
Yeah, I think you hit the nail on the head. Arizona 8-1. I don't know if there's ever been a longer shot of a first-place team to make the playoffs at that record. But I think that Carson Palmer injury, is just devastating. Seattle, they actually have 5 games remaining within this division, so they've got basically their destiny in their own hands. I think Seattle finds a way to win the better part of those games, especially with Carson Palmer now out for the Cardinals and two games in hand against those Cardinals. So I'm going to take the Seahawks to make up the deficit and find a way to come out on top here. Might even break that jinx of having some postseason success after going to the Super Bowl. I don't know if they'll repeat necessarily, but I think they are going to find a way to win this division. So go Seahawks for me. We'll leave you with the Cards, Steve. And I think that wraps us up here for our Pick Your Poison Week 10 Divisional Champions forecast. And we'll see who comes on top at the end of the season. Lastly, we'd like to spend a few minutes here chatting about the Toronto Raptors. They kicked off their season while we were on our brief hiatus there. They are looking mighty good at this point, sitting at 6-1, first in the conference as of this moment right now. Steve, your quick thoughts on the Toronto Raptors to wrap things up here.
Yeah, I don't know if there's been a time where you could ask Siri on your iPhone who the best team in the NBA is and have her answer back it being the Toronto Raptors, but that's what you're going to get if you ask it. Seeing them come out 6-1, first time in franchise history, you've got to be very, very happy considering all the promise coming in with bringing the core back and bringing most of the bench back as well. They've been really dominating some teams, just destroying Philly. Big win over Washington, able to beat OKC without their star players, just really looking good. The loss to Miami, a bit concerning, still unable to beat them since they lost Chris Bosh, but I think what you've seen so far, and considering they started the year 6-12 last year and still finished with as good as a record that they did, I think there can be no complaints at this point with their start so far, and with their upcoming schedule and with more of the Eastern Conference teams on the horizon. I see no plans in this really stopping for them.
Yep, you have to be thrilled. Again, with the success they had last year, the promise and potential coming into this year to be out to 6-1. Not their fault they're playing poor teams. Not their fault they're in the East. They're doing what they have to do in those games. They're getting wins, whether it's against the Magic or against an OKC team that isn't featuring Durant and Westbrook, which is kind of unfortunate because it would have been maybe nice to get an early season gauge there. But definitely winning the games they should. Washington doesn't have a bad squad over there. They took them down by 20 points almost. Beating up on the 76ers, the Orlando Magics of the division, the conference I should say. But again, it's not their fault that some of their competition isn't so stiff. And when you boil it down, you ask yourself, can these Toronto Raptors make the playoffs? That's our first question before you start talking about championships. The answer, absolutely yes. I don't see any way at all they don't make the playoffs this year. The East has a lot of gaps. I don't know if they can scrape together 5 or 6 worthy playoff teams, but certainly not 8. If the Raptors fail to make the playoffs this year, I'm going to say massive disappointment, even as early as it is. Steve, any thought there before we sign off?
I don't see the Raptors finishing below 4th in the Eastern Conference, actually, let alone making the playoffs. I think if they finish anywhere lower than that, that's going to be a disappointment. They have to win the division the way it's shaped up this season. There's no way it can be considered a success if they don't at least pull that off.
So we are of one mind on the Raptors' fortunes for this year. So hopefully that pans out. Again, they're off to the great start here, so nobody can knock them. Hopefully we will continue to see this going forward, and we'll spend a little more time chatting about them next week when we have a little more time to do so. But I think we're going to wrap up the show for the week there. Steve, your sports highlights for the week ahead.
Again, as mentioned before, the Leafs got some good games coming with Boston and Pittsburgh. The Raptors looking to keep it up, and got a full slate of NHL games overall tonight, so looking forward to that.
Yeah, I got to see if the Senators can prove themselves on this West Coast road trip. That is going to be big for them. I think it's going to be a big indicator as to how their season goes, how they perform here now with maybe a little adversity looking them in the eyes with a couple tough losses. As well, Sunday night I'll highlight the Indianapolis Colts are having a visit from New England Patriots. That should be an awesome game. I'm looking forward to that one. I'm going to probably be a high-scoring one. I've got a few fantasy teams that'll be maybe on the ropes by the end of that game, but should be a fun one to watch, so I'm looking forward to it. And go Colts to beat up the stupid Patriots. So I think we'll end there. Thank you very much for listening, everybody. Tune in next week when we discuss a little bit more sporting world down here in Southern Ontario. Bye, everyone.